Welcome back, everybody. Today we're doing a deep dive into something that really gets me going, motor neural networks. Specifically, we're going to be looking at how to train those networks to get smoother, more coordinated movement.
Yeah, and what's really cool about this deep dive is we're not just talking theory here. We're looking at a specific training exercise that uses this pretty cutting-edge device called IsoTone.
Yes. And from what I've read, this IsoTone device is really something else. It uses something called dynamic resistance, which basically means it's constantly adjusting the resistance based on how much force you're putting out.
It's like having a personal trainer built into the equipment.
Exactly.
Right. And that's a huge difference from regular weight training where the resistance is fixed. And the source material we're looking at today is an excerpt from a research paper that really digs into the specifics of how that dynamic resistance impacts the way we train motor neural networks.
And the paper actually uses this analogy. It talks about getting a warm knife through butter kind of feeling, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a great way to picture it.
Makes me think of those, you see those people who can do really intricate work with their hands.
Yeah.
And it just looks effortless.
Exactly. But before we get too deep into the IsoTone and the specific exercise, maybe we should step back and talk about what we mean by motor neural networks, just to make sure everyone's on the same page.
Okay, yeah, let's break that down a bit.
Sure. So basically, motor neural networks are these complex webs of nerve cells that control our muscles. Every time you move, your brain sends signals through these networks, telling your muscles exactly how to contract or relax.
So it's like this, communication superhighway between the brain and the muscles.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it.
And the more complex a movement is, the more complicated these neural pathways need to be. Think about, a concert pianist. All those years of practice strengthen certain neural connections so they can make those really precise movements.
So even things that we take for granted, like walking or even typing, they actually involve all this incredibly complex stuff going on in our brains.
Exactly. And as you might imagine, when these networks get disrupted, even simple movements can become really difficult.
So what kind of things disrupt these motor neural networks?
Well, unfortunately, aging is a big one. As we get older, our neural connections just naturally start to break down, leading to things like slower reaction times and decreased coordination.
Ah, I see.
And certain conditions, like Parkinson's disease, can also really damage those networks. And even if you're healthy, just not moving enough or not training these networks can weaken them over time.
So it sounds like keeping these motor neural networks in good shape is really important if we want to keep moving well as we age.
Absolutely. And that's where exercises that specifically target these networks can really make a difference. And maybe even this IsoTone device we're going to talk about.
Okay, so let's talk more about this IsoTone. I'm super curious to learn how it works and why it seems to be so effective for training these motor neural networks.
Sure. Well, as we mentioned earlier, the secret weapon here is dynamic resistance. So unlike those old school weights that just give you a fixed amount of resistance, IsoTone is constantly adjusting the challenge based on how much force you're applying.
So it's like having a workout buddy who always knows exactly how hard to push you.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And what that does is it keeps your brain constantly engaged, It has to keep adapting and refining the signals it's sending to those muscles.
So it's not just about brute strength. It's about making the nervous system, smarter and more responsive?
Exactly. It's about improving communication between your brain and body. And this brings us to the specific exercise that's outlined in the research paper.
Yeah. The paper talks about doing the slow, controlled, squeezing and expanding motion with the IsoTone, kind of like a slow motion pulse. It really emphasizes how important it is to do those movements deliberately. Why is that slow, controlled motion so important?
It's all about being perspective and paying attention. When you move fast, your brain can kind of rely on momentum and those patterns it's learned to get the job done. But when you slow things down, you force your brain to focus on every little muscle activation.
So it's like instead of just going through the motions, you're really paying attention to every little detail.
Exactly. Think about trying to thread a needle. If you try to rush it, you'll probably mess it up. But if you slow down, really focus, and carefully guide that thread, you're much more likely to get it right.
That's a great analogy.
So by moving slowly and deliberately, you're essentially rewiring your brain for better control, more precision. The research paper even mentions that it's totally normal to experience shaking or tremors, especially at the beginning.
Wait, really? I would have thought shaking meant I was doing something wrong.
It seems counterintuitive, right? But those tremors are actually a sign that your brain is working hard to adjust. It's trying to make those new connections and refine the neural pathways.
So it's kind of like your brain saying, hey, this is new. Let me figure this out.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it. And as you keep practicing, those tremors will start to go away as your brain gets better at controlling the movement. The paper even uses that phrase we talked about earlier, that warm knife through butter feeling, to describe that effortless glide you can achieve.
Oh, that's amazing. So this exercise, it's not just about building strength. It's about building a whole new level of precision and fluidity in our movements.
Exactly. And think about how those benefits could translate to everyday life. Imagine having steadier hands when you're writing or eating or using tools.
Yeah, that would be a game changer, especially for people who have tremors because of, getting older or certain medical conditions.
Absolutely. And even for people without those conditions, that increased control could lead to better fine motor skills, like being able to do delicate tasks more easily, and even improved athletic performance.
It's amazing to think that we can actually retrain our nervous systems to move better.
It is. And the research paper recommends doing 5 cycles of that squeezing and expanding motion, followed by a minute or 2 of rest, then repeating that whole thing 3 times.
That doesn't sound too bad.
It's like a mini workout you can easily fit into your day.
Yeah.
And as you get better, as your coordination improves, you can gradually increase the number of cycles or hold those squeezes for a little longer.
So it's a workout that you can actually adjust to your own fitness level.
Exactly.
I'm really interested to hear about what kind of results people have seen using this IsoTone exercise. The paper lists some potential benefits, but from your perspective, what stands out as the most significant?
Well, for me, the most impressive thing is the enhanced neuromuscular control.
Right.
Basically, it means your brain gets better at sending those precise signals to your muscles, resulting in those smoother, more coordinated movements we talked about.
So it's like upgrading the software that controls our movements.
Yeah, and that improved communication has a ripple effect. It can reduce tremors, make you more stable, and improve your overall dexterity, which can make everyday tasks so much easier.
The paper also mentioned that reducing tremors is a key benefit. And it makes sense, right? If you're strengthening those pathways that control stability, you should experience less shaking.
Exactly. And that could be huge for people who have tremors due to aging or conditions like Parkinson's. Imagine being able to do things with steadier hands.
Right. It's not just about looking good or being athletic. It's about improving people's quality of life.
And on that note, the paper also talks about this sense of accomplishment people feel when they start to master those fluid movements. It's like mastering any skill.
Yeah.
It can give you a boost in confidence and self-esteem.
It's like you unlock this potential in yourself and you realize your body can do more than you thought.
I love that. And while this research specifically looked at the IsoTone, I think the idea behind it can apply to any kind of movement practice that focuses on slow, deliberate, and mindful action.
So whether it's Tai Chi or yoga or even something like calligraphy, the important thing is to focus on the quality of the movement rather than just doing a lot of reps or pushing yourself really hard.
That's it. And this brings up another really important point, which is how this IsoTone technology and these training principles could be used in things like physical therapy and rehab.
That's a great segue.
Yeah.
Before we jump into that world of possibilities, though, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back to explore how this IsoTone tech could be a total game changer for people recovering from injuries and working on regaining lost function. Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about how useful this IsoTone device and these slow, deliberate movements could be for folks in physical therapy and rehab.
Yeah, imagine like a stroke patient, right? Using IsoTone to retrain their brain and regain those fine motor skills. Or an athlete recovering from an injury, using it to rebuild strength and stability, but in a super controlled way. The possibilities are pretty mind-blowing.
It's like giving people this tool to reshape their movements, to regain function or even push beyond what they were capable of before. It makes you wonder, how far we can actually go with this kind of technology.
Totally. And I think we're just scratching the surface here. As we learn more about those motor neural networks, we're going to find even more incredible ways to use these principles to improve people's lives.
So it's not just about physical therapy or athletics. It's about really understanding that connection between the brain and the body.
Exactly.
And using that to unlock new potential.
Yeah. And I think the biggest takeaway here is awareness. Paying attention to how you move throughout the day. Noticing if you feel any stiffness or tremors, anything that feels awkward. Are your movements smooth and easy, or do you feel tense?
It's like you become a scientist studying your own body.
Exactly.
Just observing your movement.
And by paying attention to those subtle things, you can start to figure out which areas could benefit from those targeted exercises we talked about. It's about making a conscious choice to move with more grace, more coordination, more control in your everyday life.
Even small improvements in those everyday movements, it can really impact like our confidence, our mood,
Oh, yeah.
even our sense of self.
For sure. It's about understanding that our bodies aren't just machines. They're dynamic. They can adapt. They can keep learning and refining how they move. And this research with IsoTone, it shows us that it's never too late to start that process.
That's a really powerful message. We have this ability to like actually shape our physicality, to hone our movements, and to experience what it's like to move through the world with more ease.
That's a great way to put it. I encourage everyone listening to embrace that journey. Pay attention to how you move, try new things, and discover what your body is capable of.
This has been a super insightful deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much about how the brain and body work together to create movement. And I'm really excited to start putting these ideas into practice myself.
I'm so glad to hear that. And I hope it sparks some curiosity in everyone listening.
Thank you for joining us on this fascinating journey into the world of motor neural networks and this amazing IsoTone technology. Until next time, keep on exploring.